Observer's log. Stardate December 1979. That's where we're going today. It is time for my friend and I. I am JClark787. My other observer here is Trekkie Eric B. Trekkie B47.
That's
This
right.
is from 60,000 Light Years, a Star Trek podcast where we are overlooking each aspect of the franchise, series by series or grouping of movies, on the road to the 60th anniversary as we are doing today. So we are going to take it in a different format this week, unfortunately, which doesn't make for smart podcasting, but hell, it's the format changed with what we're going into. We're not going into a series. We are now here to look at the original series movies. So Star Trek's 1 through 6. And I'm not gonna lie, sir, I have a sweet spot for these in my heart.
Yeah.
Just before we get into them, your overall thoughts about this phase of Star Trek?
So this phase of Star Trek, I mean, without these movies, we wouldn't have the next generation. We wouldn't have, everything that came after the movies. And um I really love these movies. There are some great movies in here, some less movie. But you know what? Even me rewatching Star Trek 5, I was like, it's not terrible. Like there's some good stuff in here. And okay, yeah, I know. But no, like watching these all together, because I rewatched them all this past week. Um, there's a lot of themes that carry throughout
Hmm.
these movies, and there's a very clear like through line throughout all the movies. And for like Wrath of Khan, the third movie and the fourth movie, it's like a almost its own mini trilogy of
Oh,
movies.
spoiler alert. That is, I will argue, one of
Yeah.
the greatest movie trilogies all time. All time.
So, but beyond that, there is a few themes which we'll get into as we talk about these that I really enjoyed as someone, myself who is, like all of us, we're all aging, we're all getting older. And
Mhm.
that's one of the major themes is Kirk's mortality and him getting older and him thinking about that. So overall, I think I appreciate these more now as a father, as
Mhm. Mhm.
as we'll get into. So as a father, as someone who's dealing with middle age and all of that. So these really resonate with me now more as an adult than as a kid. How about you?
From the high view, these six are literally like the evolution of Star Trek,
Yeah.
going from something that is very cult following from the motion picture to the time we get to six, Star Trek is mainstream as hell. Like
Mm-hmm.
in that span of time from 79 to 91, Star Trek gets mainstream as a mug, and I think it's amazing to see that over the stretch. Two, also just film in a film sense,
Mm-hmm.
way you kind of see technology evolve from 79. Like you're seeing the same story and project advancing through tech, which is interesting to see, especially, when you get to 5 and 6 as compared to the original four.
Yeah.
Um, I really think they, as you alluded to, these six establish a story that is not like what we're used to with Marvel. Like, okay, yes, everything has to
Mm-hmm.
connect. We're leading it into it. Yeah, there are parts that kind of do, they left it, but it's a very smooth way of this overarching story. But yet, all these movies are individual in their own right,
Yes.
and they've gone on to inspire more in the franchise ahead and whatnot. So it's an interesting place when you're talking about the stretch. You're talking like a heart of sci-fi, just in general. What leads to this movie is Star Wars, Counters of the Third Kind, and you get into aliens and like all like
Mm-hmm.
that. The '80s is such a sci-fi time, and so Star Trek fits right in, as a head of that pack.
Yeah, and the thing about these movies, it was like, 79, 82, 84, 86, 89. So like these movies were coming out at a pretty regular clip.
Yep.
Every 2 or 3 years, and I wish Star Trek movies now were that frequent. I mean, seriously, they keep talking about, like, another Kelvin movie. I feel they've been talking about that for the last 10 years.
I mean, if you think of the clip, we're talking about a 12-year clip here. You got 6 movies. In
Yeah.
the 15-year clip we're in since Star Trek '09, we've had 3. Like,
Yeah.
and it's been a long while since we've had the last one. So
Right.
yeah, I think it represents a nice steady stream of quote unquote content or this story progressing
Mm-hmm.
without being too much, too overwhelming. It's that lore of these were times where movies spent months in the box office. It was the only way for you to check it was to go to the theater
Yep.
over and over again before home video, and it's a golden era, I think, of kind of just culture, especially in entertainment and whatnot. But let's go ahead, jump into it. Let's
Let's
take it
do it.
back.
Let's do it.
Like I said, December 1979, Star Trek: The Motion Picture. Again, something that shouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
uh,
It
we
was
left.
it was supposed to be a new television series when
It
it
was
first. It was
the
supposed to be
movie that
phase two.
the movie that became a television series that then became a movie again.
Right. Right.
Um,
No, I mean this movie. I mean this project went through like so many iterations. Like this movie shouldn't have even happened.
why are we starting there with each?
Again, shouldn't have happened.
All right, so let's set up this way as we get into it. What's one thing you love about the motion picture?
What I love about the motion picture, and it's something that I wish modern Star Trek did more of. It's more of a philosophical movie because there's no like super bad guy trying to take over the galaxy or destroy Earth or anything like that. It's it's a more philosophical story. It's more at the heart of Star Trek. It's more mindful. Um, and when I was a kid, this movie bored the shit out of me. This
This
movie
movie
was
represents Sunday afternoons to me because it would
yeah,
always be on a Sunday afternoon on some cable station, and I'd be
right.
like, "No, ain't nothing else on. Why not?" Yeah.
Yeah. But when they released the director's cut and when they had like the remastered effects, the digital effects that brought it up, the movie, and by that time, I think I was in college or whatever, and I gained a new appreciation for the movie because I wasn't a kid. I'm like, God, this is boring. Like, no, this is the next evolution of Star Trek, and I really enjoyed that it was a story about our humanity
Mm.
and what is that next step for our species. And I like that everything felt new and fresh from the original series. They had new uniforms, the ship was refit. We had
Oh,
Decker
money.
money, money. Um, but yeah, but at the same time you were pulling legacy ideas from there was that continuity because you had Will Decker and they didn't necessarily say that he was the son of the Decker that we saw in the original series that got destroyed by
Right.
the planet killer,
Hmm.
but it was implied. And I like the tension there between, Admiral Kirk and, Captain Decker, and then Decker gets demoted. But by the end of the movie, they were working together, they were joking around, they were trading quips.
Yeah.
And I really like that, in a crisis, it really shows that the crew of the Enterprise can come together no matter who is part of the crew. And it introduced some great ideas, and I like the twist of it being, a Voyager probe,
From NASA.
um,
Yeah. Hmm.
and kind of hints of I know this is like in fan
Oh,
theories, but
the
the
Borg
Borg,
angle.
The
Yeah.
Borg angle, yeah. So it's intriguing. This movie is very intriguing to me. Um, the uniforms, it has that laid back 70s feel to it.
Oh, it screams. It screams
Yeah.
like the show screams 60s. This movie screams like, yeah, it's the late 70s.
Hmm.
That's all very beautiful. I'm not gonna lie. The thing I love about this movie is ship porn. I need to turn down the lights. I'm gonna get a little nasty with it. Like,
Yes.
look, I'm not. Spoiler alert, because we gonna kind of get into it this week or this month. When it comes time to or spoiler alert, my number one favorite ship of all time is the Constitution refit. Like this.
Really?
Oh yeah, yeah. Like it's
Of all Star Trek.
of all Star Trek.
Wow.
This
Okay.
is the ship. One, probably because it's the one I seen most as a kid. Like this,
Sure.
when you think about when to get introduced to it, like sticks probably a big reason. But just in general, she is beautiful. Like you like the fact that you literally have
Yes.
10 minutes in this movie simply carved out just to show it.
I
Like it's
and
so
I know we'll get to lower decks very down the line, but this ship sequence in this movie is parodied in lower decks when
all the
they
time.
do, and like I love it. I love it. But that scene is iconic because I'm a starship guy.
Mhm.
I'm all into the techno babble. I love starships. I've got like 100 of them downstairs from Eagle Moss. Like I love starships. And I think Scotty would say this has some very ample nacelles.
Oh shit! It's just like
I love it. I love
as
it.
you see, I got this. I got my ships right here. That's the Micro Machines collection from the '90s, and I
Yes.
would always play with the like. She's up there. The A is, but just that Constitution refit. Like as a ship, it is when you. Yes, the same design as the originals, but just the way that's put together. Like I said, it's that money. It just looks clean. She's sleek. Like when I think of a ship, it's just like, yeah, that is just the ship. And then like we have the love scene with the music because once again like the way the movie opens up with the score like they don't movies don't open with overtures anymore, like
Right.
so it's just the fact that you like it just opens up and you're getting the Jerry Goldsmith score and you think
Oh
like
my
that's the
god.
first thing you're hearing after not having anything from this franchise truly in the last like 5 years since the animated series, but really almost like a decade.
Right.
um for that to be the first thing that brings you back into it. And yeah, I'm a little rambling, like she gets to me.
Look, I really think that the motion picture is now, I think it's underrated. And I really encourage anyone listening to this, if you have not seen the motion picture in a long time, look for it on streaming, try to find that director's cut.
Oh, that director's cut is. Ooh.
And it's so good. It's a very thoughtful film.
And it's interesting because like you have the director's cut now because we couldn't do all that we wanted to, or we ran out. Like if the movie had budgeting
They
problems,
ran
all
out of
that.
money and time, and like they were still piecing
Yeah,
together this movie like a week before it was supposed to be in theaters. It's
yeah.
insane.
But the frame of it is still there. Like
Yeah.
even watching it back in the day on a fuzzy in that 4x3, it's still beautiful. But see, like there is something about that physical model. Like it's not
Yes.
just a beautiful scene, but it's like it comes across as it's there. Like that's something there. It's not
I
CGI.
can
It's not
touch
made
it.
up. I could touch it. Like I see the depth. I see the dimension. I see the way the shadows are playing. Like there is a physical object there, and
Hmm.
it brings you in. Like oh man, and then it's like literally yeah, they're doing this to show you like hey yeah we got some money now. We're panning the left side of the ship because you've never seen the left side of the ship before. You've never seen it flow right to left, and just that iconic like this the motion picture set some of the iconic imagery we see ships do in Star Trek, like
Yep.
that pan where it starts from right underneath the salsa section, just comes down, and then as it gets back to the underside, starts to zoom away as you see her go. Like that is
Oh.
one of the most iconic. Like I will stop and watch that on YouTube all day long if I need to. Like It's just it's a beautiful shot. It just screams beauty. And like I say, I'm a ship guy too. So it's one of those visual things about the movies that really jumps out in the
Hmm.
motion picture because it's like, and that director's cut where it's just so clean. I remember the first time I saw it and it's just like, oh my God, this looks amazing. And that is, it's just like, wow.
It's one of it's just one of the most iconic scenes, images in these movies. It's like just one of those moments where you really get to appreciate the work that the model makers, that the prop makers,
Yes.
that the lighting and the filming of it and the direction of it and the music, that entire score is just beautiful.
Scary,
And
scary.
I love those couple instances where they go back to see Scotty and Kirk's reactions,
Mm-hmm.
and they're just kind of smiling at each other, and that's how I felt like, yeah, this is a good ship, this is good stuff.
It's
And Kirk, like, you're there with Kirk and Scotty because Scotty helped with the refit, and Kirk is like coming back home.
it's my baby. It's my
It's
baby.
yeah.
It's a special thing here. And yeah, that's like I said, I will not I generally will not sit down to watch the motion picture. But
Right.
if I'm anywhere close to that intro scene of the Enterprise or when they launch it from dry dock, I am nope, I need to watch this. I don't care if I was watching something I really and just happened to flip to it and now it's about to come on. I'm about to miss what I was watching before because yeah, that is just specialty right there. Flip side, what
Hmm.
don't you like about the motion picture?
It it is a little long in parts. Um, did I need the when they're first going to warp? Did I need that whole wormhole scene?
Oh, no,
Probably
that
not.
scene probably okay. I was about to say yes, mate, you did need that scene.
But like, it's so weird, and it's like we're in the time warp, and it's like it slows the movie so down so much. Um, so like sequences like that are a little long. Even though they're visually spectacular, I love the visuals in this film. It's just some things definitely need tightening up. And while the director's cut flows better and they try to incorporate some of that, it's
Mhm.
still a long movie.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And they definitely could have cut some things for time. I'm thinking of the Spock in V'ger, and that's just pretty much ripping off 2001: A Space Odyssey. The eye scene, and it's like we get it. It's cool, trippy imagery, and that's what they were into in the
Mhm.
'70s. Um, but I feel slowdowns like that kind of take away from the forward momentum of the story.
Yeah, I'm with you there. It's one of it's the thing they brought over from the original series where like as I talked about with the original series, we had these great extended scenes almost of
Mhm.
dialogue and dramatic tension between characters, which really worked well for the show, but doesn't work so well in the movie. Like you brought up some examples. I'm thinking of them in the rec lounge when McCoy, Spock, and Kirk, and they're trying to get that seems drawn out. There's some sick bay scenes which really seem drawn out. And it's like that's a piece of the show that they kind of feel like it got carried over, and it could be because of the
Mhm.
whole it was a show that back and forth thing as they were trying to get things together. Incidentally, but yeah, it's definitely a bit of a slog. Like
Mhm.
it's it takes it's a good watch, but yeah, it can take some like okay.
And you brought up a good point. Like it's not a movie that I like choose to sit down and watch unless it's like something like this where I'm revisiting it after a few years of not watching it. Like,
Yeah.
when they did this 4K remaster, I took this as an opportunity to watch it again, obviously, and appreciate it again. And I know they came out with a special edition that I have when they brought it to 4K. That wasn't part of a set, and so it's a movie that I'll watch like every 3 or 4 years, but I'm not like seeking it out like, oh, this weekend I'm gonna
Yeah.
watch the motion picture for the 20th time or anything like that.
Also, got to shout the film. Reintroducing the Klingons.
Yes.
With the makeup and the
Money.
language now. Money. Yeah, we got
Money.
money now. It's not just dudes in brown face. We got money now.
And
But
that was great. And Mark Orand, who had to come up with the Klingon language, and he was working on all these motion pictures like the Vulcan language, the Klingon language. So I appreciate that attention to detail, and this movie, for having that budget to expand the universe a bit.
yeah. Hmm. All right, let's move on a little bit. Let's shift forward to possibly what I mean. It's arguably it's no, it's inarguably the movie of the franchise. Yeah, I can
I might argue it.
some people might. Any no matter your position, it's up there in the top. So like
Oh, of
it's
course,
up
of
here.
course.
Like
Yeah, yeah.
this is a cornerstone of the
Yes.
franchise. We're talking Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. Lower budget. The motion picture didn't do what they wanted to do. So as Star Trek does, it did amazing things with a lower budget. Of course, this is Nicholas Meyer.
Yep.
And the big twist being, Spock dies at the end. This is the only
Game
one that
changer.
yeah. This is the only one out of the original six that I've seen in theaters.
Hmm.
I saw when they did what was it, 35 one
Yes.
of the anniversaries a
I
couple
I
years
also
ago.
saw,
Yeah.
yeah, I also saw in theaters, because I mean, with all of these movies, 79 I wasn't even born. Wrath of Khan came out a month before I was born.
Hmm.
And at 91, I was 9. I wasn't watching Star Trek at the movies. So, um, aside from re-releases like the 30th or whatever like 40th or whatever it
Yeah.
was, showing, this is the one of the few that I got to see in theaters, when they did a special release or whatever. So, yeah, and again, director's cut, restored, 4K. Uh, it's
Beautiful.
it's amazing. It's an
I mean,
amazing story.
also because it uses a lot of the stuff from the motion picture that what will become a legendary Trek trope is the
Yes.
recycling of the same sequence and scene. But once again, because it's my favorite shit of all time, and I would watch that over and over again. You could launch it like that any day of the week. I will be the one guy in the audience. I'm here for it. Yeah, to be honest, this I don't want. There's not much to say about this film that hasn't already been said. To be like, this not it's just a classic. Like I said, it is the cornerstone of Bedrock. Just that when we're talking about cultural shifting things, like you talk about the death of Spock and the stories of how they kept that secret, and to the impact that it had on the franchise, to the fact where Leonard didn't want to come back, but they had such a beloved character that they had to leave it open in a way to see what could happen. Like that's
Yeah.
crazy.
And this is the start of a trilogy of movies, like an arc. Wrath of Khan, Search for Spock, and Voyage Home.
Yep.
They all, take place together, like concurrently, because these events are happening. It's a solid block of movies, and with Wrath of Khan, it was a sequel to Space Seed, which I don't think a lot of people were expecting at all. That there would be a sequel to a television episode, and
Just that connection, like
yeah,
because we glanced over like the motion picture was the first movie to have a TV cast return in full.
yes,
So and that's in any franchise. The motion picture
right,
was big for that. And so yeah, now we have Star Trek 2. I literally is one of the first movies to take something from a TV show and continue the story.
yeah, and they do it in such a way where you didn't have to see the original episode because they explain everything. And no, and it's iconic because, there's that scene when Chekhov realizes that they're on the Botany Bay.
Chekhov, you weren't
Botany
there then.
Bay.
Weren't there then, Chekhov.
And Chekhov wasn't there. He wasn't in that season but, they when Khan says, "Oh, I never forget a face." Well, a lot of people forget that he studied the entire crew complement and ship's library. So Chekhov could have been there, but he was just never part of the bridge crew. So I mean, things like that you can forgive because it's dramatic storytelling. And God, I'll never forget the thing that stands out in my mind when I watched this as a kid was the eel worms. Like
that's still a scene, and I'm just like, if I can miss this one, I don't have a desire for that because that's just
But again, when you see the behind the scenes, they made like a gigantic ear to and a puppet to like achieve that effect. And you're right, they were working with a smaller budget because the motion picture didn't do as great as they expected. And but my God, this has one of the greatest like submarine type tension ship battles of all time.
It's balance of terror on that budget level. Like to think this is the first time we truly see the Enterprise in real battle. Because most of the time we see it fire phasers, maybe you see it torpedo, but you don't like this is the first time we really see the two ships at the same time interacting. Also, like really the first time we're seeing a new style of Starfleet ship that isn't Constitution class for the most part with the Reliant. And so that nebula that final, not even necessarily the final fight, but the first encounter, like these were ship battles that we had never seen within this franchise like that before.
And the tension in those ship battle scenes when Khan first fires on them and their shields are down and the Reliant was coming up guns hot and they're still like, what the hell is going on? And oh God, and then the whole thing with the prefix codes and like the Reliant shields go down and they're like, we're losing shields. He's like, fire. And it's just, oh God, I love it so much. I love the cat and mouse between the Reliant and the Enterprise. And that realization that you don't think about much in Star Trek, but they pointed out in this movie is when Spock says, Khan's thinking two-dimensionally. We're three-dimensional in space. And it's like, wait a minute, because in the series, we're so used to ships approaching at the same axis. And so, for those beautiful shots in the Mutara Nebula, like the Enterprise is up here, the Reliance down here, they're searching for each other.
Ship porn.
It's gorgeous. It's amazing. I'm floored that they were able to do these effects with the budget that they had. Just again, incredible, masterful direction. Ricardo Montalban is chewing every scene that he's in. I freaking love it.
Having the time of his life. Just going ham. Yeah, it's to me, especially with these earlier films from the motion for the TOS cast. What comes to mind is kind of like what the Superman tagline: "You'll believe a man can fly." With the way they filmed it and the techniques, like you believe there's a starship flying. You believe these two ships are in this nebula having this battle. You believe it, and it's like it's just amazing. It's something that's lacking now. Like just there is something about the physical model and just the way it works within your mind that just. I think, unfortunately, as good as CGI can look, as amazing as some of the things CGI can do, because even with this fight, the Enterprise, it goes down, but it's not like, oh, we do a dive. No, it stops and then just descends. So it's limiting still in what we can do with it. But what they did, though, is just incredible, amazing, and beautiful.
And things like the matte paintings, like the Genesis Cave, and how they do that gorgeous matte painting, but
Hmm.
they still add like the sparkles for the waterfalls. And this was the first movie to have the earliest form of computer
CGI.
graphics
Yeah.
with the
Yeah.
Genesis, when they explained Genesis.
Yep. So once
Star
again,
Trek
leading the way again.
pioneering.
And that scene, as a kid, that scene would always, when they got to like the Rocky formation part,
Yeah.
I'd just be like grabbing my knees, like, oh, that looks rough. I like as if I was going to scrape my knees on, like, as it just, whether it was the one in two or in three, like, just I'd be like, oh, that
That's
looks
gonna
rough. Okay,
hurt.
the water's there. Okay, the water's there.
It's
Yeah.
fine. But so this movie at the beginning, Kirk has a birthday and he's feeling depressed, um and it was, if you look at the timing of the movie, like Kirk is like 50, 51, and
Hmm.
Shatner was the same age when they filmed this. And so there's a lot of like, what life do I have left to give? All this stuff. It introduces Kirk's son,
Yeah.
David. And so, first off, finding out that Kirk had a son, like, okay, holy cow. Obviously, it's one of his romantic flings, and Carol Marcus even brings it up. She's like, "What was I gonna do? Was have him go with you hopping around the galaxy, or I'm gonna be a single mom here and raise him without knowledge of you?" And I mean, that is like that hits you to the core,
It's real. It's real.
especially in this trilogy that this movie starts. Um, and that's one of the through lines that you see in these movies is Kirk coming face to face with his mortality, and what does he have left to offer, and that sense of trying to re-find his purpose. Because when he was an admiral, he got bored, he felt stuck. And it always
Yeah.
resonates to me when I watch Generations, when he tells Picard, never let them take you off the bridge of that starship.
When you're on the bridge, you
And
make a difference. Yep.
it's because of these six movies. And Wrath of Khan starts this like through line.
I like how you phrased it when you were putting it that this story kind of mirrors where they were at in life, because I think that's a big part of this film. As you said, like outside of it, yeah, they're at this point, like you didn't want to be in a franchise like this. Like, and when we see
Because you're
this
being
movie,
typecast.
right? And so now it's like, yeah, they had the original series back in the day. This is the second movie, and like I said, it's now starting to really become something. And so it's like, as we see, Leonard has Spock killed because he didn't necessarily want to continue with the character anymore. And so I think it's also kind of that realization, okay, is this something we're going to lean into? Is this all there is? And outside of Shatner for the most part, 'cause Shatner
Mm-hmm.
is really the main one who was able to do other things later
Right.
on.
Right.
The roles that these characters were playing, they got typecasted. That's who we know them as. You didn't really see them do much outside. So yeah, it's very parallel to kind of the start of the story and aging in
Mm-hmm.
life and where that's taking you. Gotta ask, because we treating it fair.
Okay.
What's
Okay.
one thing you don't like about the Wrath of Khan?
I think that it unfortunately starts the trend of a movie has to have a villain. Like Star Trek
Mm-hmm.
movies have to have a villain.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And some series, some seasons of series, which we'll get into, kind of like hinge on having a main villain. And I think that starts to take away from the purpose of Star Trek. Exploring strange new worlds, encountering the unknown. And that's why, as I'm older and I appreciate, Star Trek more on a philosophical level, I think movies um, like the motion picture, like Voyage Home, like
Mhm.
Undiscovered Country to a degree. It's more about like where are we in the universe and like what we do impacts the future, which we'll get into with Voyage Home. But so the thing I don't like is that yes, this is a wildly successful movie. Everyone lists it as their favorite. I get it. Um, but it's because it's that classic revenge story. It's that classic, two commanders fighting it out. And of course, it's Ricardo Montalban, it's William Shatner.
Two characters just
They're
hamming it up, hamming
they're
it up.
they're the battle of the ham-fisted acting. It's bombastic, it's action-packed, it's dramatic. So, yes, I get that, but I think unfortunately people have tried to recreate that formula, and
Mm.
that's why I hate Into Darkness so much was because it was we'll get into
We'll get
that.
there.
We'll get there.
We'll deal with In the Darkness when we get there.
Yes, yes. But I think, unfortunately, Wrath of Khan started this trend in Star Trek movies where you have to have like an overarching villain from the past. And some movies do it to a greater degree than others. But yeah, that's the one thing I kind of dislike about Khan. What about you?
Very valid. Yeah, Khan is the white whale of the Star
Yeah,
Trek franchise.
yeah.
Real is there something I really don't like outside of the earworms and those nasty things? I honestly, there's not much. I think there's nothing I
It's
really
hard.
don't like about Wrath of Khan. Like there really isn't. It is just a solid piece of cinema that
Yeah,
I can put on and enjoy. Back in the days when I only had two Star Trek movie DVDs, it was this Khan was one of them.
yeah.
Like that's it's just one I can enjoy over and over again. Yeah, there's it's it is what it is for the reason it is. So I to be honest, yeah, and I can generally find negatives about anything. There's not really much. So I'll co-sign on the white whale part.
So I do wanna ask
Hmm.
um about Lieutenant Savick.
Savik, what about?
Who do you think does the role better?
Oh,
Because we had wow, why am I blanking on the name?
Christy Alley.
Yeah, we had Chrissy Alley and then we had Robin Curtis. And obviously, Robin Curtis came in to replace Chrissy Alley. Um,
Ooh, that's honestly something I've never really thought about before. Because even though it's two different people playing the same character, the character has different roles in both the main
right,
movies we see her in, and so part of that kind, in my mind at least, helps me make a distinction. Like, okay, yeah, this is what Savick is doing here,
sure,
and now like it's almost like that's young Lieutenant Savick in Wrath of Khan. By
yeah,
the time we get to, even though Star Trek 3 isn't much later, because of this Khan experience, she is now a more seasoned Starfleet officer. Still a little green, but she's definitely not the same green she was in Wrath of Khan. Yeah, to me they're too distinct. I've never really compared them. How about you?
So when I was watching this, rewatching these kind of back to back, it wasn't that jarring for me, and I think Robin Curtis did a great job, giving Lieutenant Savick her own character,
Hmm.
and so I think what you said is very poignant. Like it feels like there's just a shift in her character just because of the events of Khan and what she had to go through. And yeah, I think Robin Curtis filled those shoes, and yeah,
I'll say this. This just popped in my mind. Although at the time, this is really like outside of Homeboy who got scrambled in the motion picture. This is only really like the second Vulcan you're getting introduced to. And I will say, having more of the franchise now with us, Robin Curtis's version to me comes off as more what we understand Vulcan to be.
Yes.
Whereas
Yes.
Kirstie Alley, I low key see Kirstie more than I see the character of Savick sometimes, and that may be simply because she's such a huge actress, but
Right.
she doesn't scream. Like it's not like, oh yeah, that's a Vulcan. Robin Kurtz's verse is like, okay, that's a Vulcan. Kirstie doesn't always give me that. So if anything, I'd probably lean more towards Robin because of that aspect.
And you can also think of it as, because when we're introduced to Savick, it's, the Kobayashi Maru
Mm-hmm.
simulation, and this is towards like right at the beginning of the movie, and you think, wait, who's this person in command of the Enterprise? And they do that fake out, and like
Oh yeah.
everyone's kind of like dropping dead, and you're like, wait, what's happening here? um, so yeah, I think her being a little green around the edges, but there are certain scenes where she does seem less Vulcan. I think the one thing that stands out to me is when she's in the turbo lift talking
Oh,
to
and the
Kirk
with the hair, with the whole
with
hair.
the hair thing, and they make the hair comment. I thought that was a little bit out of place. But no, otherwise, like as a whole, I really enjoy Savick as a character. Like we get to see Spock mentor someone, of his own kind,
Hmm.
and I think that's really cool that he had someone like a student, not just of Starfleet, but of like Vulcan and logic.
Let's fast forward a little bit to Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock, June 1st, 1984, smack dab in the middle of blockbuster season. This is the unanticipated sequel to Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan, where somehow they convinced Leonard Nimoy to come back. Well, he agreed to come back as Spock if he got the chance to direct, and as we see, he doesn't appear as Spock till the end. There's like what is
Right.
it, 6 or 7 people who play Spock throughout this movie, I think.
Yeah, yeah,
This is the
representing
AJ. Yeah.
all of the stages, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, he did direct this one, which I'm glad that, personally, for Leonard Nimoy, I'm glad that he got to try something new and do the direction. And um I know a lot of people over the years in the fandom have talked about like the odd film curse, but I
Star Trek
I
3 is
don't
not like
I
that.
don't think that.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
I think they're all varying degrees of entertaining and good on some level. I really enjoyed Search for Spock.
Oh, Search for Spock is the one, as in case you didn't miss it's gonna catch our intros, which I invite you to go back and do previous episodes. Search for Spock is at one point that was my Star Trek, simply because that
Hmm.
was the one we had on VHS recorded off TV. So that was like at one point I would be like, "What happened to Spock? Like, why is Spock dying?" I was like, "Oh, okay, Spock died." Like at some point or something happened to Spock. Don't know why, because this was like the movie that really introduced me to Star Trek and the one I had seen most
Mm.
as a kid.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, it's a great middle portion of this trilogy. I really like Star Trek 3 because one, it starts a Star Trek trend of Star Trek actors directing Star Trek, which has worked out to be something great.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
and it's also the first film where it's really focused on the original series cast.
Hmm.
The motion picture you had new characters in David and Ilea, who were big parts of the story. In Wrath of Khan, you had Savick and David and new characters who were central parts of the story being focused on, and for a good portion of the movie, the cast isn't together. Same thing
Right.
as in the motion picture. This was the first one that was really about the cast, and their characters, and not really being influenced by while Savick and David are in this movie and have crucial roles, it's still about Spock with the and their
Yes.
dealings, and then the other parts of the crew as they come. So I think that's a nice thing about this film is that aspect.
There's a lot in this movie that I appreciate because I love that the original crew come together to save their friend.
Hmm.
That the Katra of Spock is in McCoy's mind, and so they're not only trying to help McCoy, but they're also trying to, they discover that Spock is resurrected.
Yeah.
And I love how they steal the Enterprise. That's
Throwback.
that's incredible. Yeah. I really like how the crew came together for this.
It's also the first movie where the crew gets their own shine. Like
Mm-hmm.
Chekhov has his moment in this film. Yeah, Chekhov has his moment. Sulu has his moment. Uhura has her moment. Scotty has his moment. Bones is, a major part of this story, but that's the usual. And like it's the first one where really they all have some real things to do to an instance and get some chance to get their own shine. And so yeah, continuing that trend of bringing things back. So you have the whole, yeah, they stole the enterprise, the trope of stealing the Enterprise,
Yep.
the destruction sequence code, that kind of Easter egg. And so it's interesting to see because at this point, yeah, 84. Like at this point, yeah, it's still these three films and the original series. There's nothing else outside of that. But at this point in the franchise, to already see it is well establishing some of these characteristics of, before Easter eggs are popular. We're making connections to what has come before, continuity, and kind of just letting you know that, yes, this is a universe. All this stuff has happened before. It matters.
Yeah.
I think it does a good job of really setting like, oh yeah, this is something here that this franchise does.
Um, and part of that is just how amazing that, this story evolved, and they even had to keep the destruction of the Enterprise secret.
Another whammy. You kill Spock the movie before, and now you're going to destroy the Enterprise in the next one.
And people are like, well, how are you going to have the next movie if the Enterprise is destroyed? And it's it was just a crazy sequence. And I love Christopher Lloyd as the Klingon commander in this. Like, I didn't realize it was freaking Doc
Spock,
Brown
right?
until I was older. And I was like looking at the credits, I'm like, wait a minute. And then like, but he is so good in this.
He's
He's
going
like
ham.
one, my God, that he's like one of the best, like, just mad, like, glory driven Klingons. And he just wants Genesis.
He
The
again,
secrets of
if
Genesis.
you think about it, like all we have had like Klingons were the baddie at this point, which is why they make so many appearances throughout the movie, even though it
Mm-hmm.
was supposed to be the Romulans in this one because the whole bird of
Yeah.
prey thing. But like here he is, like how crucial is this role to expanding Klingon lore? Like the look of them, how they acted, really getting time with the Klingon language. Like apparently some of my earliest words were Mark Charlie Chu. Like I was like those are my dad would tell me how I would just be saying that. And so, but like how again integral just this film is into what has come after because like, oh yeah, we're getting that Klingon lore, early Klingon lore that's setting the trend for what we would see explored later on and patterns. And so it's nice just once again just see it's like, yeah, it's not a rush growth, like, yep, here it is all at one time, but you see how it has built over time and
Yep.
expanded, in a natural progression.
And yeah, the just um, bringing Spock back, the Vulcan mysticism. We learn more about Vulcan as well. Mark
Yep.
Leonard comes back as Sarek, and
Yep.
that begins his integral part in these movies. And continuing that line from the original series where, you know, Spock and his father didn't agree. They didn't get on terms. Spock wanted to go to Starfleet. And so you see that, and then to see Sarek's, this is the start of Sarek's growth too, where he realizes that Spock has these amazing shipmates, his friends, that are like his family. And I just, Star Trek 3 is a really good film.
Oh yeah, and continuing that Kirk line of like, what good am I? You know, if I'm not out here
Yeah.
saving the world or what, like, what good am I to my friends if I can't do, something of this, like, of this fortitude? I gotta do this for my friends, this family. Like it gave him something to do in the moment. It's like, okay, yeah, like this is, I've been questioning, am I getting old? Am I still useful? And it's like, I'm gonna do this for my friend, my brother, my homie. That's this.
And just, you see more of Kirk's just, on the fly thinking, like when he pays attention to the transporter
Mm,
command. And but I mean, God, the death of David, the death of his
that's
son, and where he, like, it's just through comms, and he's like, oh, Savick, like David, like, and then, when Savick tells him that David is dead, and him like stumbling back, and that emotion that hits him, my God, it's,
that scene is quiet because I saw it the other week because it was
yep,
on the movies and moves. They were on some cable channel and Star Trek 3 was on and got to the scene, and once again the music is great in the movie, and so it's
all
it's a
these
movie highlight by the
movies,
music. When
all
you
these
got
movies, the
yeah,
the music is on another level.
and it's that high tension music of the battle, but when you got to that point of David's death and Kirk getting that new, like, it is quiet, and you just, I'm like, as much as people talk about Shatner hamming it up, whatever, he delivers in this scene, like,
He
in a way that's
delivered.
just like, oh, like, oh, and as you mentioned earlier, it's like, now as a father, it's just like, oh, no, no,
Yeah,
no,
oh my
no,
God.
I've only known him for 3 months, maybe, or who knows how long it is, but
Yeah.
still, that's my son. Like, yeah.
Oh, just, it's a good movie.
Yeah, no, yeah, yeah, yeah. It tugs at you. It's so. Is there anything you don't like about Star Trek 3?
uh, the weird implication that him and like Spock and Savick got it on, and it's like that hidden, like, yeah, the Vulcan, the Ponfar, and it's like, we get it. We could have skipped that a little bit, but I mean, really, there's, I'm having a hard time finding something to really dislike about this one,
Hmm.
because I love how the crew came together for Spock to save their friend. It's just such a powerful message, but yeah, the budget still isn't, the best. So
That
there's some wonky effects in there. I thought the Targ puppet was a little cheesy, but hey, we got to see a Targ.
yeah, that's probably the one thing I don't like. So as clean as the first two films are, the biggest downgrade here is really, as impressive as the scene is when the Enterprise is pulling in the star dock,
Yeah,
space dock. It's a little off sometimes in terms of depth. Like they try, and but with the paintings, but it
yeah,
doesn't quite. It's not quite right. Still impressive. Still a beautiful scene. I will watch it over and over again because that's my
yeah.
baby. But yeah, it's just a little off.
And there's a couple things, like when David and Savick are on the Genesis planet, and there's, like, snow covered cacti that don't look quite real enough. I mean, so you see a little bit of the budget lacking come through a little bit. I think that does a little bit of disservice to the great story of this film.
Okay. Fast forwarding some more. Let's go ahead. Just two more
Let's go.
years. November of 1986. The final part of this trilogy, Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home. Just overarching. Yeah, I great trilogies. We all know, the
Yes.
original Star Wars. trilogy, Indiana Jones, the original Indiana Jones trilogy,
Mm-hmm.
Back to the Future is a great sci-fi trilogy. You hear, I, Matrix, whatever. There's a bunch of great trilogies. You don't hear people really talk about Star Trek as a trilogy.
Yeah.
But honestly, I think just one, because of the story being told across all three films, the way that each film is different. Star Trek 2 is a different type of film than Star Trek 3, and Star Trek 4 is also like they're all different from one
But
another.
the story
It's
continues.
yes. And so yeah, I would put it up as one of the greatest trilogies in film out there, and just what it is able to accomplish and what it does.
I have to agree with you on that. It's this movie. So Star Trek Two was, the revenge
Space battles.
space battle film. Three was the heist saving
Yep.
a person. Four is the sci-fi trope of time travel.
Yeah. You're hitting every Star Trek once again is able to tell a story through a variety of different ways. And so, yeah, you're now getting to the, okay, yeah, Star Trek does some good time travel stories. And this is, bam, smack dab, one of the greatest time travel stories.
Plus, Star Trek isn't, very light-handed with its social commentary, and this was a film about saving the whales.
Back dab, middle of the 80s.
Yeah, I mean, ecological problems that, unfortunately, we're still dealing with today.
Which is sad. It's like,
It's
wow.
sad. It's like we not learn anything in like 40 years? But for real, like I love this movie. This is the one that, if it's on, I'll watch it.
Okay. Okay. I think I see where you might be leaning with this one a little bit. Um, yeah, I think it's impressive because it's also impressive because it's Star Trek without the Enterprise. As you mentioned, we were talking about, Search for Spock, and they blew up the Enterprise. People are like, what are you gonna do? This is literally as
Yep.
important as this Enterprise is as a character, as a hero ship is, and of course you have the Bird of Prey, as
The
the hero
HMS
the HMS
Bounty.
Bounty for this film. It's still Star Trek without the Enterprise, and it works.
It works.
It works. It's
And
not in
and they're using Klingon phasers and they're using
right.
Klingon communicators. They I love this movie. And what I love about this movie, also the tonal shift that now that Spock is back and he's regaining his memories, he's trying to figure out him. It's more of a lighthearted film. There's
Yeah.
more comedy in this. Still some serious scenes here and there, but it's definitely more lighthearted than the past two films. And I think that uplifts this trilogy of films is that it is lighthearted and there's some great, funny, iconic scenes in this. When
It's
they're swearing and like the colorful metaphors and hello computer. I mean, there's so many iconic scenes in this film.
it's not it's also it's time travel with that fish out of water syndrome, and it works well. The
Hmm.
music brings the lighthearted feel. Star Trek 4 starts one of my favorite trends musically, or it's one of the things I really enjoy. Star Trek 4 soundtrack, let me put it that way,
Yes.
or kind of that ending score into the theme for the film. Like I have a like it this is the movie that starts that trend where it's like, oh yeah, that ending score is just beautiful and it wraps things up. So in this case, you're talking about, after the trial and they find they get to the Enterprise, and it gets to the end. Like this film starts a trope for me personally where I was like, yeah,
Hmm.
these ending scores are just A plus, with the music.
And that was something on this rewatch specifically for this podcast. I was I was keeping my ear open more in this rewatch for the music.
Mm,
And this has one of my favorite um musical themes that they use throughout the movie. It's like the ba, da, da, da,
yeah,
da,
yeah.
da.
Hmm.
And like I love that you can hear hints of that throughout this film score. It's beautiful.
It's so yeah, it's Leonard Rossman did the soundtrack on this one. Again, different these movies were their own musically because it's really with five forward that you start to get to the point where they bring back the Jerry Goldsmith
Right, right,
theme and incorporate it into almost anything going forward. Star Trek's 2, 3, and 4, they were all their own sonics, which didn't include the Jerry Goldsmith theme,
right.
but yet they still work for Star Trek. They perfectly encapsulate the movies and really help set that scene and tension and work really well. And like I said, yeah, that's again, I'll watch the end of Star Trek 4 any day because you're talking about another one of my babies. Just again, one of them iconic shots, coming out that pan and hitting the warp. Yep, I'll rewatch that over and over again. But also, like the love that you get with the bird of prey, this movie, you also get it in Star
Oh,
Trek 3. But man, with the way what do they're not
the
wings, but they're
wings.
wings.
They're
Like
wings. They're
they're wings.
wings.
Like when they would at the end of Star Trek 3, you see it, it goes up and it lands, so it's like a bird, and then but you all see it down. If like you get so many beauty shots, like I'm thinking of when they're going after the whales, in the ocean, saving them from the hunters, and it's the way
And it's just like
oh,
perched above that boat. It's
it's
so
just
iconic.
and again, it's a physical model. It's not see
Oh,
I
yeah.
the it's not a perfect looking scene yet, technology, but it's still like it's a physical model. You see it there. I believe that this thing is literally over this bay, over this ship right now, the shadow. Like yeah, that bird of prey is a beautiful, beautiful model, and just whew.
And and going back to what I said earlier, I love the scene towards the end of the film with Spock and Sarek, like their
Mm,
conversation, and Sarek, finally accepts that or admits that he might have been wrong about being mad at
yeah.
Spock for joining Starfleet, and that he sees the depths and the lengths that Spock's friends will go to save him and to bring him back. And
What he's meant
yeah,
not just to them, but also like literally the Federation. Like he's literally saved
yep.
the Federation through this, and it wouldn't have happened if he wasn't there. So yeah, yeah.
And just the whole thing where they're like on trial and it's like, hey, you guys like assaulted Starfleet officers, you stole Federation equipment, you tampered with equipment. Like they're listing all that stuff, and then but it's like, okay, but you guys saved the world.
We'll give you a pass on most of this.
Kirk, you disobeying a direct order, that's on you. And now you're going back from admiral to captain, which is what he wanted, and the command of the starship, and the Enterprise A, which is another Constitution refit, but it's so good.
And again, that Kirk storyline essentially, like, not as only this the conclusion to this trilogy, it's literally since the motion picture, this has been something that hasn't been sitting right on, since being promoted to admiral. So now
Yes.
it's finally like, and I think that's also a beautiful part is the way that this movie ends. It's not setting up anything. Like it's just the crew together. Because literally, as much as Star Trek 3 was the first movie where we're focused on the crew, think about it. Star Trek 4 is literally the first movie where the crew is together for the majority for the
Yep.
movie. Star
Yep.
Trek 1 is bringing them back together. Star Trek 2, Chekhov is off for half of it. Star Trek
Right.
3, Spock is dead and on a planet. Like this is the first film where it's like, yeah, the gang's all here and we're all together doing this.
And I love this movie for so many reasons, but the fact that everyone gets a job to do in this mission, like
hmm
they are all critical to saving Earth and bringing these whales into the 23rd century. Every member of this crew is vital, and you see their talents on display. Like Sulu piloting a
The
helicopter.
helicopter, yeah.
I love
But
that. I love that
the,
they're using their talents.
the temporal paradox. We're guessing that Scotty and McCoy, pull off.
Transparent aluminum.
You know, are we sure we're not breaking rules by giving him to? How do we know he ain't created in the first place? It's just like, yeah. It's just, you're right?
Hey, the as long as the Department of Temporal Investigations in jump in, we're all good here.
Oh, gee, but this is it's just a it's a great end to this story, this trilogy.
Yeah,
It's a great book and a great sci-fi film that wasn't while this one was about saving the world from a threat, it wasn't about a big battle. It wasn't about a
it
big
wasn't
fight
a huge
sequence.
enemy.
No,
Again, we've got the whale probe, but that's more of like a intergalactic philosophical conversation. It's not an enemy going, "I'm here to destroy the Earth." Like it's none of that, and that's why I tend to gravitate more towards those type of Star Trek.
it, it's
As
and
I
it's
get older, yeah,
and it's also
it's
this is pure
fun.
sci-fi. Like think about the solution. Like something is going to wipe us all out on the face of this world. What is it? What's going to save us? We need some whales to save because we don't know the connection, we don't know the why, but it's a great premise because it's just like it opens you like, yeah, big universe. Who knows? Like and I like that kind of stuff. Like I have my beliefs, all that kind of stuff, but
Yeah,
there's my beliefs don't necessarily like close off from like, yeah, we don't have all the answers. Who knows? It's a big universe. And yeah,
it's
one day something might show up, be like, yeah, I need to talk to some owls. What? Okay. Okay.
and that's why I like just the premise of the movie, because everyone on Earth is like, I don't know what the hell is this? What's happening? And Spock is like, wait a minute. And then, they figure it out and they work together. And just the line of like Kirk working with Spock, and he's talking to her. He's like, "Hey, can you run this transmission and run it through salinity and like make it sound like it was under Earth's oceans?" Like they're all
Yeah.
working together, like out of the box thinking. And yeah, I love this movie. And like, you know, the fact that again they are referencing the original series with the slingshot maneuver of time
Yeah. Yes.
travel.
Yes. Yes.
So
Very,
they're
very much
they're
so.
working within the confines of the universe that they set. Enterprise isn't a stranger to time travel,
No, nope.
and that slingshot effect was in the original series. So
Yeah.
I love it.
But building the blocks and like, yes, this stuff has happened before. It matters. And in a time where you didn't like the 80s is really where you really start to get some of these properties that were telling stories that were
Hmm.
connected. We see, these great trilogies, Star Wars, Back to the Future, Indiana Jones, where it was connected, but Star Trek had more than they had to offer. So it is great to see. It's like, yeah, we're a movie, but we're from this TV show, and so yeah, we're gonna bring this thing that we used to do forward. And yeah, these characters are the same, they matter, and so yeah, it is great to see these universes that we all love, but not being forcefully constructed or rushed. This is something that's
Right.
building in a proper time.
And again, I can't stress enough this trilogy. Watching these back to back, it's just such a complete, great story.
Amazing. All right,
Uh,
moving on to Star Trek Five. The Final Frontier, June 1989. What's something you love? Say something nice about Star Trek Five.
for me, Star Trek Five is about the deep friendship between Kirk, McCoy, and Spock. I think if anything out of Star Trek, they're that they always were the triumvirate of
Yeah,
friends, but this movie highlights the power of their friendship. And Kirk realizing at the end of this film, because at the beginning of the film, they're all around the campfire, marshmallows, we get all of that. But, they're all lamenting on the fact that they don't have family.
yeah,
But at the end of the movie,
They are their family.
They're
Yeah.
they are each other's family, and I think that is a great message for this film. And I know this movie gets a lot of crap, but their friendship throughout this movie, and you get to see, Spock's birth and how like disappointed Sarek was, like, oh, so human. And you see McCoy's regret for the death of his father, knowing that he pulled the plug when a few months later they had the cure from what
Right.
his father was suffering from. And, you know, Kirk not being tricked by Cybok because, Kirk builds upon his pain, and he doesn't need to relive the past because he's trying to be better for himself. Yes, it is this movie's directed by William Shatner. It's not the best. Again, the budget was dog crap.
Oh, effects are trash. What they did to my baby was disrespectful in this movie. Like,
Yeah, and the Enterprise is going through some hiccups and its shakedown, because it's a little bit after Star Trek 4. But despite all of that, I really like just how much this movie really solidifies the Kirk, Spock, McCoy dynamic.
very, very nice and very valid point. Because yeah, as we talked about, kind of how all the films so far have been different. Yeah, this is the first film where it is, yeah, back to that Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. You have not seen that. You've seen moments of the trio. They did that a little bit in the motion picture, but it was
Right.
still kind of, we're regelling. This is, yes, it's the three back together and they doing what they do. What I love about this movie is the ending. Again, it's because
When the credits are rolling, you're like, thank God it's
no,
over.
no,
No.
not thank God it's over.
No.
Again, I
Yeah.
love the score that begins literally as soon as that campfire scene is over, and and it's my favorite entry into that Jerry Goldsmith theme
Yeah.
because it has that little warp effect. You get the little warp warm up as the camera is panning up over the woods, so it's a little different take, and I always love it. So again, because I love the music of Star Trek, and it's the highlight for me of this movie, because yeah, there's just not much else. It's the part where I was like, yeah, I'll watch the end of Star Trek 5 any day. Yeah, campfire scene? Yep, sure. 5 minutes later, okay, I'm good. I've seen enough of Star Trek 5.
I mean, I rewatched it, like literally. I rewatched this yesterday, and I know this movie gets a lot of flack. Trust me, it's not on my top five. Um, but again, we still get more Klingons.
Yeah.
There's more depth to the Klingons. There's more building of Kirk's hatred for the Klingons, which really pays off in Undiscovered Country. So
I think at this point the Klingons were getting
yeah,
a little played out a little bit. So I also think it's kind of because it's kind of like, okay, yeah,
there's a little bit of that, but I do like that there's a little bit of humor when the Klingon general that is on the Paradise Peace Planet, and he
Mhm.
basically makes the Klingon
Oh,
commander apologize to Kirk. I thought that was pretty pretty cute in a way, but no, this movie, I mean, it's not the greatest, but I think there are hints of good things in this, and like I said, especially that friendship. Um, yeah, and Cybok is out of nowhere, but
yeah, it's a.
and we'll get into it when we get to Strange New Worlds, because there's
Hopefully, we'll have some
people.
more to get into.
Yeah, people are hinting that we may get more Cybok.
You
So
better. We've been deep. Anyway,
yeah, I know. So yeah, I mean, there's not a lot I can say about this movie, but I
I'll
do
say.
at the core, the friendship is there.
I'll say this once again, what this movie does continue a trend. Somebody taking over the Enterprise and doing with it as they please outside of Kirk's will. So that there is that trend
Right.
that continues. Well, I just had something on my mind. Jesus. Yeah, I lost the thought. Don't know. Whatever it is. It's gone. It'll come back. Who knows? We'll see. Oh, here we go. From a production aspect, because it's
Yes.
89, I think it's interesting looking at what you see in this movie in terms of you kind of see some L cars a little bit because you've had Star Trek: The Next Generation at this
Yep.
point has begun airing, and so yes, they have L cars there, and so in five with the technology you kind of see on the Enterprise, you see the first early edition of L cars to kind of reference, okay, this is you watching
And
TNG.
because it's Enterprise A.
Yeah,
And so it's already got some of those upgrades that Starfleet is
right.
rolling out. Yeah.
Yeah. So that from that side, it's once again nice to see, okay, universe progression, expansion, especially, or in this case, we're literally seeing the tying in of, okay, yeah, some future stuff is already happening.
Hmm.
You see a little bit of that here. And it's like, so I in this case, it's as we see in this era, it's mostly blue and green and white text, versus by the time we get to TNG, it's that purple, orange, and what so it's I'll say that about Star Trek 5. It's nice to see kind of that progression for the technology
And
as it gets to go on.
and yeah, part of that too is because this was in '89, and you're right, like Next Generation was happening. We see that carry through to maybe some of the look of the props, not just L cars, but the makeup of like the Klingon
Hmm.
general ambassador that was on the planet, and like the costumery and like the Klingon gauntlets, which were being
Shuttlecraft.
refined, the
We
shuttlecraft, yes, and like even the Romulan Dar, she
Oh
had
yeah.
more of that like Romulan look that we get to know. So I that's where I think we get the both the TV show and the movies were coming together in a
Hmm.
way, like on a behind the scenes aspect. Like now that they had a full time show going on, they were able to use sets and a lot of
Star
that.
Trek reusing sets? Never.
but
Never.
but you'll see it like in this in Undiscovered Country. A lot of the Enterprise A sets are recycled from the D,
Yeah.
and so they were filming this, on the off filming of Next Generation.
Is there anything else we need to say about Star Trek 5?
No, we can move on.
Okay. All right, moving on. Fast forward, and now we're in the 90s. Whoo, 1991. December
Yes.
once again. Star Trek 6.
And in the 90s of 2293, we
Oh,
went
yeah,
from the 80s to the 90s there.
there we go. Star Trek 6, The Undiscovered Country.
Probably my favorite original. It's my favorite. You know, I I
Yes,
I I
yes,
I
yes.
talk I talk I've talked to my friend at work, Tony, about this. I like this more than Wrath of Khan.
Which, again, we see Nicholas Meyer, who did Wrath of Khan. He returns to direct
Yes.
Star Trek 6. Screenwriters include him and Danny Martin. Lenny Nimoy worked on the story as well. So we see,
Mm-hmm.
this kind of where you kind of get some of that, Shatner, Nimoy tension, who directed what, who had more success with the movies. And yeah, Leonard
Sure.
gets the win. Um, yeah, Star Trek 6 is just, again, a completely different film. It's a political sci-fi thriller. Again, not a somebody's going to destroy the world. It's an issue at this point. It's being very reflective, because early 90s were, Cold War's behind us.
Yeah.
The world, things are kind of opening up in the world a little bit. So this is kind of referencing like the fall of the Berlin Wall and stuff like that. Like it's very
Mm-hmm.
reflective of things that have happened recently in history. And
And that's
it
what
is
Star Trek does best.
bingo. So once again, referencing what it's done before and currently, it's all of Trek wrapped in, and it's just it is a good Star Trek 6 is the one I will pop. Like if I'm looking for something to watch,
Yes,
I'm popping in Star Trek 6 because I can
I
watch
will
it.
watch this one all the freaking time.
It's a good movie. Like what when
You
I
you
talk
have
about
you
I had
haven't heard Shakespeare until you've heard it in
heard
the
the original
original
Klingon.
Klingon.
When I referenced I had two Star Trek movies on DVD back in the day. One of them was two, six was the other. Like
There
that
you
is
go.
is yeah, Undiscovered Country and the way that it connects to greater Star Trek lore, filling in a little hole, but not necessarily having to go all the way in. But it's just a key moment in the
Yes.
universe of Trek because at this point, yeah, TNG is on air, successful, and there's a Klingon on the bridge. Okay, these guys,
And we get Worf's
yes,
ancestor,
and
Colonel Worf.
cool Easter egg there. And this is literally okay. How do these two come together? And
Hmm.
it's a great plot. It's yeah.
And this movie, like introducing the Kittimer Accords,
Mm-hmm.
which continues and is mentioned in
Variety. It's a
future
variety of ways.
series
Yeah,
so
variety of
many
ways.
ways. And this peace process with the Klingons, and this, they're trying to frame Kirk for this. It's yeah, you're right. It's a political thriller, it's a murder mystery, it's a jailbreak,
Mm-hmm.
it's it's all of that, and it's a conspiracy. And I freaking love Valeris in this.
Mm. Okay.
She's a great, like,
Kim Control. Okay.
manipulator. Yeah, I think Kim Cattrall did an amazing job as Valeris. Um, I get chills every time Spock does that mind meld with her,
That's a
and it's
harrowing
like, oh
scream. That
my
is a
god,
harrowing scream. That's like Uhura's face says it all
yeah,
in that moment and speaks to a lot of things that they were probably kind of and yeah, that's a deep, uncomfortable scene,
yeah,
but in all the right ways. And Star Trek doing what it does, speaking to things
yeah.
and
And
just
and
being
and this one also has a director's edition, which, it there's not much that's changed, but there's more context and there's some editing that, kind of tightens it up a bit.
the biggest scene is really I find missing is at the end at the peace conference after Scotty shoots the renegade, not really Klingon. Generally,
Right.
what you find edited is Colonel Worf on the floor. This isn't Klingon blood. I find that's the one I find edited out the most. Like that
Yeah,
scene, you just don't see that scene if it's being aired on TV or even on streaming or nothing.
exactly. But oh my God, there's so many great, there's so much greatness about this. And General Chang
Oof.
is, my God, Christopher Plummer is an amazing actor. His daughter coming back for Star
Yes.
Trek 3 as another villain chewing up the scene. Just a great legacy there. But everything with the Klingons of this movie is incredible. The fact that we get to go on the big, Klingon warship,
Yeah.
and Chancellor Gorkin, and just everything about this movie, just the intrigue and the mystery and everything about it. And hands down, one of my biggest, like full circle moments, when they first see the Excelsior in Star Trek
Oh,
3,
yep.
Sulu makes a comment like, "Ooh, I hope we get Excelsior or whatever."
And to see him be, yeah,
And he's the captain of Excelsior. And not only that, in my favorite, one of my favorite Star Trek series, Voyager, we get
it's the flash, yeah.
flashback, which references this movie, referencing my favorite original series movie. I'm eating good in the Star Trek universe. I love Undiscovered Country. It's incredible.
Taking one quick step back since you brought up Sulu, and we know the tension that Shatner and why am I blanking right now?
Nimoy.
No, not Nimoy, but
Oh, George Takei. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
Shatner and Takei have had about this movie with the whole he took himself off the bridge. what I love about the movies as a whole, these six, was again what they did subtly
Yeah.
is just being blunt. I saw people like me mattering and in positions of purpose, authority, and moment. So, like I'm not, I'm sure the Asian American, Pacific, communities. Like, I'm sure that was big to see Sewell in the chair, commanding his own seat,
Yep.
ship. The motion picture when Scotty is working to fix the warp problem. It's a brother standing next to him helping. That's to me. That's nothing little. That's because in this moment, this
And
is crucial, and it's not just another guy. It's a bro.
Star Trek 4, Black Woman Captain.
Black woman captain. You have the first introduction of Admiral Cartwright in Star Trek 4, who
Yes.
who even though he's a bad guy, once again we see another character coming back for this movie.
Right.
He plays Cartwright in 6. He's good in 4, but then he's allowed to be bad in 6. Great. You have
Also in 4, which we forgot to mention, there was in the distress call the first Indian
yes,
captain.
captain, yes, given the distress call. In Star Trek 3, you have another black admiral. In the original
Yes.
series, you had multiple black admirals. So what I
Star Trek
love
2, Black Captain
Yes,
with
yes.
Tyrell.
Yeah, Captain Ross. So what I loved about the movies as a whole, they continued that same trend of, as Nichelle Nichols put it so fondly a lot of the times, was black people were in the future. We were
Yep.
on the bridge and we were mattering. And so it's not just about being black. Like I said, you bringing up Sewell. Sewell was another reference of that. Yeah, he was able to grow and become captain of his own vessel. Like
And
that is huge.
and even minor characters, minor in the original series, like Nurse Chapel became an MD.
Yes.
She became a full doctor, and then we saw Rand join
The
Sulu's
Excelsior crew. Yep.
Excelsior, and so it's elevating what Star Trek does best. It's elevating people to have that equal future where
Mhm.
we all matter.
And again, Star Trek 6 isn't connected to directly to previous movies. It's its own project, its own thing.
But
But
it
yet
builds upon it.
the through the yeah, the because you again we get more continuation of the whole aging, the conversation between Kirk and Spock, is it possible we've lived so long, we've outlived our usefulness, or and they're about to retire, like, so it continues that thread of we're seeing this crew
Yeah.
age
Yeah.
and move forward in life, and continuing that through there without being another direct sequel. No, it's another part of the story as it continues to move on.
Also, Kirk, because of this movie, he's able to move past his hatred of the Klingons as
Yep.
well. Like, even in the beginning of the movie, like that line that's used against him, I'll never forgive them for the death of my boy. And it's used against him in the trial, but
Let them
towards
die.
let
Let
them
them
die.
die, he says. Yeah.
Yeah. It's and even just in that one movie, his turnaround and
Mhm.
his ultimately his respect for the Klingons and the peace process and realizing that this is important. And there's always going to be people that try to halt progress, but I'm glad that Kirk kind of stepped out of his own way and let this peace process happen so you can have Worf on the
Yeah.
bridge of the Enterprise. And I think that's beautiful how they were able to, like, in this last TOS movie, they were able to connect it to Next Generation. Fortunately, they had the hindsight of a few episodes of TNG under their production, so they
Oh
were
yeah,
able
this
to
at this
make
point
that
TNG is
connection.
well underway. Yeah,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
as you brought up, yeah, you're using the engineering section of the
yes,
D gets used as for both the Excelsior and the A.
yeah.
It's the same corridors, it's the same bridge. So again, Star Trek, we're using sets. What? Before we move on, real quick, we didn't forget to mention. I can't believe we didn't mention this. I'll say this and create a safe space. You can choose whether or not you want to
Sure.
respond. We're recording this at the end of October in
Okay.
2024. And as we were mentioning, how you had representation throughout these movies,
Hmm.
literally in this movie, you have a female leader of the entire a woman becomes chancellor of the Klingon Empire.
That's right.
They very easily could have made that. Oh, we'll make that his son. You know, you haven't really seen too many female Klingons for the most part.
Right, right.
So here you have a
Even
woman.
though in the last movie we had that very
Yeah,
buff.
yeah, 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 very, very brolic. But here you have a woman leading the entire demographic of these people. But that's all I'll say. Star Trek once again doing what Star Trek does.
Yeah, I mean, no, it's true. This movie is just such a great representation of everything that Star Trek believes in. And there is some villains. We got General Chang and we got the admirals that were in the conspiracy and Valeris. But overall, it's about that political spin on
Right.
the world of Star Trek, on the universe of Star Trek. So yeah, it's a very political movie, but it balances the politics and the mystery and the action. I love this movie so much.
Oh, I mean, what this movie also does, because at this point, this is only the third major space battle that we get, and
Yep.
because you don't really get one in one,
Oh,
don't get one
the
in
way,
four, you don't get one in
yeah,
five, really, and they do it different. Like, okay, we've had space battles, we've seen one on one. You get that
but we
that
haven't seen
shot.
two on one.
Right. And so that shot of right before they destroy the bird of prey, where you're on the right bow of the Enterprise and they're just alternating. And it's just like, oh, again, a simple thing too, but but
Yeah,
it looks good because you got these physical models. Once again, it's simple, but yet it also is giving you that action. It's not built on all these effects. We don't have to see every
right.
torpedo hit the Enterprise. We're seeing the shaking, we're seeing the damage. You understand what's going on without having to see anything, and you also get a really cool moment
And the
in battle.
solution that the Excelsior was cataloging gaseous anomalies, and they're trying to find a cloaked bird of prey that can fire.
Gotta have a
Great,
tailpipe.
that ingenuity and that creativity that they were able to come up with the solution. But what always gets me is when Kirk's like fire, and he like says it the
It's a
second time,
classic.
I
It's
just
classic.
like
Yeah,
fire,
yeah.
and I love it. I love Sulu in command of the Excelsior.
Yeah, it's also great because it's Star Trek 6 is known as this is the final voyage of this crew. So
Yeah,
it's also once again, I love the end. When they're on the ships, chatting, saying goodbye, and you
yep.
got this beautiful once again a beautiful ending score. The music for Star Trek 6 once again it's its own thing. Beautiful, iconic, sweeping, but also emotional with the goodbyes, the sailing off, second star to the right and straight on till morning and then you get the signatures which
The
we see right back in
signatures
the
are
ending. But
so
yeah,
great.
oh,
Yeah,
it's a touching moment. And what I'll say is also incredible is I was thinking the other day while watching this is okay, you're like, we don't get to see too many real ship comparisons in Star Trek.
hmm,
In this movie, you get the A and the Excelsior next to each other, and the Excelsior is a big ship. It's dwarfing the A. And
yeah.
then I'm like, oh, I can only imagine because we've seen the D and the Excelsior class flying together, and D is dwarfing Excelsior.
Yeah.
What it would really look like if the Constitution refit was next to the
It's a
Galaxy.
small ship.
It's a small ship. It's not, but we don't get to see that. We don't get to see too many examples of that
Right.
simply just because of the way the shows are put together and demonstrated. So it was on the other night and it was watching the end. It was like, yo, yeah, Excelsior is because Scotty's like, oh, that's a big ship and not as big as her captain. And, it's like,
Yeah, one of the
yeah.
greats.
So what's something you don't like? Here, I
This,
know mine. I know mine.
okay, okay.
It is the scene where they're crossing into Klingon space on the way to rescue Kirk and McCoy from Rurpente,
Yeah.
and they're doing the translating thing with the books. It's just like come on, like it's a scene was like y'all are playing this for jokes, and it's like it's just
That is a bad one, and I don't like it in hindsight because of how we see Uhura betrayed or portrayed in other media, like with
Yep.
Strange New Worlds, and like we know she's better than that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so yeah, you're right. That scene is pretty
You
wonktastic.
got her there, and somebody else is having to give her the translation, and she's the
And then
communication
they're all
person.
like,
Ah,
ah ha ha ha, and like laugh. And yeah, it was definitely played for jokes. I didn't like that as much. Um, I think that might be actually.
yeah.
I think you nailed it. There's very little in that film that I don't like, and I think you nailed it.
All right, we have made it through the
Wow.
6 movies. Not quite done yet. So we
Yeah.
just go quick. So overarching, gotta ask. We're gonna go through some of our rankings real quick. At this
Okay.
point, everything from TOS is number one. We don't really need to talk about crew here. It's the same crew, so we're not making any changes
Right.
there.
Right.
Sir, hero ship. Where we got,
Hmm.
we had the Constitution class original, but now we have the Constitution class refit. Out of those two, what's the ranking, sir?
And like, I can't just throw in the Excelsior. It has to
No,
be the
no, this
hero
this
ship.
this this is the
Okay.
hero ship.
Yeah, I mean, come on. It's the upgrade. It's gorgeous. It's beautiful. We're gonna knock off the Enterprise A at some point.
Speak
But
for yourself. Speak for
maybe
yourself.
for mine. But I think in terms of versus the original Constitution, it has to be the A.
Yeah, yeah. The Constitution class refit is the
Yep.
one for me. Like I said, unfortunately, spoiler alert, we got a long way to go, but I would highly be surprised myself if something removes the A out of the top spot.
It's
Uh,
it's a good looking ship.
let's talk uniforms. And so we have a little more option here because we have,
Sure.
we've had the original series uniforms, we had what we saw in the motion picture, and then we
Right.
have, before we get into the ranking, how do you feel about the Monster Maroon? Because it is, you had the change in Wrath of Khan to where we had
Yes.
everybody's kind of wearing the same color. It's more naval, and we see that persist throughout Star Trek 6. How do you feel about the Monster Maroon?
So the Monster Maroon as like a jacket and like the cut and the fit, I love it. The thing I don't love about it is like if you look at Memory Alpha, like the command colors and all the different badges, it makes zero sense.
Yeah, yeah,
Like there's like I get it, like white for medical, but there's like beige and like a light green, and like the cadets have red collars. It's all over the place when it comes to like the colors and ranking. But overall, as a jacket, I would love to own a Monster Maroon. I think those are incredibly amazing uniforms. Definitely a reflection of the period of the movies, because during like after the motion picture it seemed like Starfleet was getting more militaristic
yeah, yeah. Very
because
much.
of the war with the Klingons, and so that definitely reflects it. And I know those costumes, those Monster Maroons in the Star Trek universe timeline lasted a long
Long.
time, because even
Yeah,
Picard in his early Academy days and
yeah.
when he was like known Jack Crusher, I mean, they got rid of the collars and it was the same jacket, but those
Production issues.
right, well,
Production.
sure. But that style in Starfleet lasted decades.
Yeah.
Whereas now you're in like the 2400s of Picard. It's like they're changing their outfits like every five
There's like
years.
8 different uniforms, but we'll talk. We'll
Right,
talk.
we'll get there. But no, like I do love the badge. I love the badge, the belt buckle, like the nice tailored pants, the boots. There is a more militaristic feel. So I think right now, from our options, I think the Monster Maroons are top of the list for me.
Okay, so what you going? What? So where's the motion picture fitness? So you got Monster Moves number one. What's two and three?
Two is the original series. Three is the motion picture. I do not. They look like pajamas.
my ranking is the same there, and literally the same issues with like the monster. It's a
It's clean.
clean uniform, but unfortunately, as it's an issue I'll have when we get to some of the later stuff as
Sure.
well, i.e., like some of the TNG movies, is Star Trek needs the color.
Yeah.
It needs the color.
Yeah.
I get, it's the reflection of the era and the times and the look they were going for, and it works. It's clean.
Yeah.
It's a very clean look, but
And it unifies
yeah.
all those movies.
Yeah, no, yeah, very much because yeah, it's clear in two. You see it in the beginning of three. You see it at the end of four, all
Hmm.
throughout five, and all throughout six. So yeah, it's very much like the look of this era. It's clean, but yeah, I'll echo right
And
now. It's number one, but it won't stay there.
and I do like we get hints of like suit variations because when they're going down to the Paradise Planet in five, they're all in like a militaristic like SWAT version
Mm,
of that. They've
yeah,
got like the security vest. So I and like in Wrath of
Uhura has a
Khan,
skirt in Star Trek Six. She gets the skirt back.
yes, yes, and there are other variations like I like when captains get kind of like an alternate uniform, like a different jacket. Yeah, so
Kirk's uniform in the original in the motion picture. I'm not gonna lie, is
yes,
pretty clean.
yes.
It's pretty clean. His admiral uniform is pretty clean, even though the rest of them look like pajamas.
But then he's like wearing a short sleeve version. The rest of it, it's all over the place.
All right, so let's
All
do
right.
it. What is the movie ranking? We already know our number ones. What is it's I mean it's easy for me.
Hmm.
It is 6, 2, 4, 3, 1, 5. That is my ranking. 6, 2, 4, 3, 1, 5.
I'm not really gonna argue with that. I think that
I'm not
no,
surprised.
I think that's a very fair ranking.
It's yeah, it's
Yeah,
pretty quite and simple. All right. I'll say this before we get out of here though, because I meant to bring it up when we were still talking about six. It's a
sure.
teaser for it won't be TNG. Or we'll touch on it a little bit in TNG, but those who complain that Starfleet never gets dark, we literally have them you know, a certain aspect of Starfleet deciding to go into a, assassination attempt. But for those who like to
That's
say
true.
that Star Trek is,
Yeah,
Star Trek 6 shows you it gets a little dark.
it can
You
get
know,
dark.
it can get dark. But yeah, I think we'll wrap there. Let's any final thoughts about the TOS movies, my good sir?
No, I think we pretty much said it all. I highly recommend the 4K remasters for this. I think they've replaced them on streaming, but especially for I know that there's director's cuts for Wrath of Khan, the motion picture, and six. I would definitely, if you haven't watched those, they don't change a lot,
No.
but I think the most dramatic change is with the motion picture, especially when they did the remastered effects, and because that movie did have a lot of problems behind the scenes, and it was very rushed, and the director didn't get his full vision realized until the director's cut. So, if you haven't seen it in a while, I highly recommend the director's cut of the motion picture. Give it a
That's
shot.
one. That's one I'm hoping that they do at some point another theater watch comes up
Yeah.
because that's that's one I really would like to see on the big screen because visually, yeah, that is a visual masterpiece.
Yes.
They did three, I know, a couple years ago, but there
Hmm.
was no showing down here around me, so I wasn't able to
Okay.
partake, unfortunately. So we'll see. We'll see. I'm not necessarily concerned about four, five, or six necessarily as much seeing in theater,
Hmm.
but yeah, at this point, I think it's beautiful because coming up next, we're going to get into TNG. But at this point, the house is built. Like Star Trek is Star Trek, and so now I
Yes.
think it's we're at a point where things really kind of start to get rolling. But thank you for joining us on this look back right now, as we have looked back at the original six movies. If you didn't catch our TOS look, we have go ahead and check that out. If you just want to know a little bit about me and Eric here, we got an episode talking about our love for Star Trek as a whole there as well. wherever you get your fine podcasts. Like, share, subscribe. Please join us for this journey. And yeah, until next time, it's TNG, Star Trek: The Next Generation. It's going to get
I'm here
interesting.
for it.
All righty. Well, you take care, my friend, and the
Absolutely.
rest of y'all live long and prosper.
Peace and long life.